Today, I have titled this message, Prayers of Tears, Joys of Blessing. I have preached with a similar title before, something like, One who weeps before God and smiles before people. If we were to classify people based on tears, smiles, and laughter, I believe we could categorize them into four types. First, there are those who laugh both before God and before people. These are the people who simply laugh every single day, no matter where they are. What do you think, everyone? Wouldn't someone whose mental state is a bit unusual be laughing like that every single day? Or perhaps, a truly happy person, free from worry and anxiety, could live always smiling. For such people, without stress, they probably wouldn't even get sick. Then there is another type, those who weep both before God and before people. Such individuals might be pessimists, or perhaps suffering from depression, or patients with chronic illness. These perpetually tragic and pessimistic people would always live in sadness, shedding tears. There is yet another type. These are the ones who laugh before God but weep before people. Such people are exhausting. They are always complaining. Do any of you like people like that? I generally don't want to be close to someone who is always complaining. The fourth type of person is one who weeps before God and laughs heartily before people. What kind of person would that be? I believe that a life where we come before God and pray with tears, and then laugh heartily before people, is the desirable life for us as Christians. With that in mind, I want to share today's message and receive grace together. Now, let's return to today's main text. King Hezekiah. In the history of Israel, King Hezekiah is revered as a righteous king, almost on par with David. Hezekiah became king of Judah at the age of 25 and died at 53. So, he reigned for a remarkable 28 years. He was a king who governed the nation well, upholding God's will. His father, Ahaz, was an evil king who stripped the temple of its gold and silver decorations to build altars for idols. However, his mother, Abijah, was a queen who devoutly served God. Fortunately, Hezekiah did not inherit his father's wicked nature but instead inherited his mother's character, becoming a king who greatly feared God. He became an excellent king who served God. At this time, a new rising power called Babylon emerged in the north, near the Euphrates River. This was an era when Babylon swallowed up Assyria, which had conquered northern Israel, and went on to conquer all the nations in that region. Initially, when the nation of Babylon, or rather, when Sennacherib of Assyria attacked with 185,000 troops before Assyria was destroyed by Babylon, Hezekiah repelled them. He was a king of such capability and bravery. However, Hezekiah then fell mortally ill. The Bible does not state what disease it was, but it calls it a fatal illness, as the prophet Isaiah came and delivered God's message. King Hezekiah now had two prayer requests. First, "O God, I must not die now. Please heal my illness." He had a prayer to be healed of his fatal illness. And second was to defeat Assyria, that powerful king. With these two prayer requests, King Hezekiah went before God, turned his face to the wall, and prayed desperately. How intense was that prayer? How does the Bible describe it? It says he prayed with bitter weeping. He prayed with bitter weeping. The sound of his weeping was so loud that God heard it. Hearing that prayer, God again called the prophet Isaiah and said, "Go and tell my servant Hezekiah, thus says the Lord." The prophet Isaiah went and delivered God's message to Hezekiah just as it was, proclaiming it in this way: The God of your father David, I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life, and I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will also protect this city. King Hezekiah offered two prayers, as I mentioned. Please heal my fatal illness, and second, please protect our nation from Assyria. When he earnestly offered these two prayers, God heard his sincere, tearful prayer, and had Isaiah deliver God's message again. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal your illness and allow you to live 15 more years, and I will protect this city from Assyria. How old was Hezekiah when he died? He died at 53. In our modern era, dying at 53 would be considered dying young, but in ancient society, that was living a very long life. He lived to a ripe old age. Both of Hezekiah's prayer requests were fulfilled. His life was extended by 15 years. I mentioned it at the beginning. Hezekiah came before God and wept. He came before God and prayed with tears, and God saw those tears. Seeing those tears, God accepted both of Hezekiah's prayer requests and answered them. Ultimately, Hezekiah prayed with tears before God and was able to laugh before people. Who is the kind of person who can weep before God and then laugh heartily before people? The answer is clear. One who practices spiritual discipline. How does one pray? They pray with tears. To pray with tears means to pray earnestly. It means to pray with all your might. Believe that God hears earnest prayers. Who else exemplifies this? Job did. Job was called the most righteous man in the East. So, let's take an example. In our church, who would we say is the most faithful person? Probably someone who is very deeply spiritual. Furthermore, the most faithful person in Jeonju. Do you know how many churches there are in Jeonju City? There are about 1,000 churches. That's a lot. The most faithful church in Jeonju City. That would be a great honor, too. Going further, if someone in our country were known as the epitome of faith and belief, that would be the greatest. Job was such a person. He was the most righteous person in the East. He was called the most righteous, leaving no one else to compare to. Then trials came upon Job. Enemies invaded and plundered all his possessions. He had 10 children, and they were gathered for a birthday party when a strong wind came and the house collapsed, killing all 10 children that day. It didn't end there, did it? Even with just this, it would be hard to live, but Job was afflicted with painful sores. They were so unbearable that he used a piece of broken pottery to scratch his itching body, and his whole body became covered in blood from the agony. Seeing this, his wife said, "Are you still going to fear your God? Curse God and die. Where is God?" She said that and then ran away. There was no one to understand or comfort Job. Not a single person. On top of that, Job's so-called friends came and debated with him for 7 days, continuously rebuking Job. How should a comforting person act? They should bind up the wounds. But instead, they scratched the wounds, making them more painful. Your suffering isn't accidental. You committed some sin against God. That's why this is happening to you. Would such words be a comfort to Job? He couldn't bear it. But listen, Job prayed to God like this, "Oh God, only you know the path I take. When you have tested me, I will come forth as gold. After you have refined me, I believe I will come forth as gold." He prayed with tears. No one recognized Job. There must have been many people around who had received help from Job. Yet, no one felt pity for Job or wanted to share his pain. No one cried with him. At this time, Job went before God alone and wept. He prayed with tears. The conclusion is found in Job 42. The Lord restored Job's fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. God heard Job's tearful prayer. After that, Job was able to live his life smiling before people. Do you know how the very last verse reads? Looking at Job chapter 42 verses 16 to 17, it says, "After this, Job lived 140 years more. He saw his children and their children to the fourth generation." So Job died, an old man, full of days. He lived out his full lifespan, saw his lost sons and daughters, and even his great-grandchildren before being called by God. If you weep before God, you can smile before people. You all have various prayer requests, don't you? There might be some of you who shed secret tears. Come to God. Come to the temple and weep freely before God. God sees those tears. God sees those tears, and I believe that He will wipe away every tear from your eyes and enable you to go out among people and laugh heartily. No matter what happens, if you come before God with that problem and pray with tears, I believe God will enable you to overcome that problem and eventually grant you a bright smile. I bless you all to be people who come before God in this way. Look at those who have done great things. They have one thing in common. Every single one of them wept before God and smiled before people. Don't all of you have goals in life? Whether you are young or old, bring your goals before God and pray with tears. Believe that if it is God's good will, He will bring it to pass. When we think of the prophet of tears, who comes to mind? Jeremiah. Jeremiah's era was also a very corrupted time. God had Jeremiah prophesy the destruction of Israel. Go through the streets of Jerusalem and search among the people. If you can find just one person who practices justice and seeks truth, I will not destroy this city. Jeremiah searched around but found no one whom God would spare. He prayed with bitter weeping. How did he pray? In Lamentations chapter 2 verse 11, it says, "My eyes are wasted from weeping, my heart is wrung within me. My liver is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed, because children and infants faint in the streets of the city." Jeremiah, seeing such scenes, wept until his eyes were damaged, and became a prophet who delivered words of comfort to the people. I will not prolong today's message. How wonderful would it be if we, as believers, had no suffering in life? However, suffering comes to everyone. It comes even to those with strong faith. Without exception, times of suffering will find us. At that time, do not be flustered. Come before God and pray with tears. Believe that God will undoubtedly give you the power to overcome that suffering. Therefore, when our saints face truly difficult times, I pray in the name of the Lord that we all may pray with tears and then, before people, overcome all these problems and live with a bright smile, always with a smiling face.